I'm going to encourage everyone to come on in, start taking your seats, settle down. We obviously have a rowdy crowd here today, a good-looking crowd, a smart crowd. And I want to tell you that I'm Chuck Holmes. I'm the executive director of the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this event, which we call the Alabama Colloquium, a highfalutin name for what I think you're going to find is a very enjoyable and enlightening event. We normally hold this event in Birmingham, and we normally hold this event when there's not a pandemic. We have brought it back, and we decided to bring it back to Montgomery, primarily because our honorees were from this part of Alabama. And we're so glad we did. I mean, look at this room and look how we had to shoehorn tables into this ballroom and still had to turn away people who wanted to be here and couldn't be part of this event. So I'm very glad that you are here today to support our honorees and the Alabama Humanities Alliance. For those of you who may not know much about us, our organization is a nonprofit. We're the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we focus on the disciplines that make us all human: culture, history, law, ethics, philosophy, storytelling, things that enrich our lives, enrich our communities. And in a time when things are so divided, and it seems like we all can't agree on anything, we believe at Alabama Humanities Alliance that our work is more important than ever. And we thank you for supporting it. This is our signature event. And it happens once a year, but we would like you to be involved with us year-round. Before last year, this organization was called the Alabama Humanities Foundation. And the board decided to make a name change. I can tell you a piece of advice: don't take a new job when an organization is going through a name change and a website revision. I learned my lesson, but a name change to Alliance. And why Alliance? Because allies, we want allies, and we want all of you to be our allies. Let me give you a sense of what's ahead. In addition to honoring Bryan Stevenson and the late John Lewis, we'll be recognizing several other important people who assist our organization in our mission and who work to uplift Alabama. We'll be hearing from the state's poet laureate, Ashley M. Jones, and Bryan will take the stage with NPR's Michelle Martin for a conversation. And you all get a bonus prize. On your way out today, we have copies of Bryan's book, Just Mercy, available for you at no charge at the tables outside. Thank you. Of course, none of that would be possible without the support of our corporate and philanthropic allies, and especially our presenting sponsors, Regions Bank and the Montgomery County Commission. I'm so pleased to have their support. And they're at the tables here around front. If you could, let's give them a round of applause. As pure as we like to be with our mission, these things take money, and we're very happy to have that support. I also want to thank our event co-chairs, Luana Bradford, Reggie Hamner, and Andy Wheel. If you all could stand up. Luana, stand up. Thank you. Also want to thank the EJI. We, somewhere along the way, someone in our office or in Bryan's office said, well, you know what, you might make part of the day is a tour of the Legacy Museum. And show of hands or applause, how many of you got to the Legacy Museum this morning? And worth it? Let me hear, was it worth it? Yeah. Thank you for that. It's a great day to be in Montgomery, and we're excited to revive the colloquium here. I now want to introduce Montgomery County Commissioner Doug Singleton. Doug represents District 5 here in Montgomery County. He serves as vice chair of the commission, and he, like all the other members of the commission who I had the pleasure of speaking with about this event, were very supportive of us bringing it to Montgomery and highlighting all the great things about this county. Doug?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. I love the way Chuck runs a meeting. He told me I had 3 minutes to welcome and do the invocation, and don't feel like you need to take all of that 3 minutes, he said. So, but on behalf of Montgomery County Commission, Chairman Elton Dean, my fellow county commissioners, Rhonda Walker is here. Rhonda, if you would stand up quickly. We want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this great event as we're honoring two great men, two men with great legacies. One's continues his legacy, John Lewis, and then also Bryan Stevenson, which has done so much for Montgomery County and the city of Montgomery, not only in tourism, but also in awareness of so many different things. I had a chance to see the movie Just Mercy. I appreciate getting the book. I don't read much. I have to watch movies, Brian, but thank you for the book. But I got to see the movie Just Mercy along with my family, and what an impact it had on not only me, but really on my younger daughter. I had a chance to go to New York City a few years ago and meet Anthony Ray Hinton and speak with him during the reception for a good period of time. And I was blown away by what he told me. I wasn't expecting what he was going to tell me. But here's a man that was unlawfully imprisoned, convicted of a crime he did not commit, on death row for 30 years. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's going to have a lot of resentment, a lot of animosity in his life, a lot of hate. Because I've had resentments and grudges against people that said something about me in high school, or members of my family. And y'all laugh, but some of y'all know what I'm talking about. But family members that we don't spend holidays with because they said or did something 10, 15 years ago. And here's a man that had the worst possible thing happen to him, and all he showed me was love. He never complained. And I could see the love of Jesus Christ in him. I could see the love for Bryan Stevenson as a young attorney stepped up because he cared about somebody he never even met before. So thank you again on behalf of Montgomery County Commission for allowing us to be a part of this. It's such an honor for us. If you would, join me in prayer. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for Mr. Lewis, Mr. Stevenson, the legacies and contributions they've made not only to Montgomery but to this entire world. Lord, I had the opportunity about the first of the year to attend a celebration of 50 years at a small country Baptist church. They were celebrating the pastor's 50 years. He was celebrating his 50 years of marriage. And I never will forget what he said that day on the stage at the end of the service, hand in hand with his wife. He said, I want to share with y'all the secret to relationships, how to be successful in your church, in your marriage, and in your life. And I was expecting some great revelation, Lord, some wise words from this man. And he simply said, we just love each other. Nothing more, nothing less. We just simply love each other. My spouse, my church, my family, my relationships, my friends. Lord, so my prayer today is that here in Montgomery, Alabama, we could start something called We Just Love Ourselves, each other. No matter what side of town you come from, no matter what color your skin is. You're just going to love each other as, Lord, you have loved each one of us. That's my prayer today. And as you bless this food to nourishment of our bodies, Lord, make us mindful of the needs of others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Doug, thank you for that invocation and for your support. I promise you I'm going to stop talking and let you eat and talk, but not right now. I'm going to say a few more words. You see the logos of many of our partners who support the Alabama Colloquium on the screen. They're all represented here today in attendance. These companies and organizations support us financially, and they deserve our gratitude and thanks for not only supporting this event, but for the programs that we carry out throughout Alabama year-round. Many of these companies and many of you out there went above and beyond. You took this event and you donated tables and seats to college students from the institutions that you see on the screen here. We're happy to have those students with us today, and we're especially happy and grateful that our partners saw the value in providing this experience for young people. The colleges, let's hear from the college students. College students out there? Excellent. All right, now, mind your manners. Let me also extend my gratitude to my colleagues, my staff at the Alabama Humanities Alliance and the Alabama Humanities Alliance Board of Directors. Their names are on the screen right now, and I'd like them to stand, if you don't mind. Board members, please stand and be recognized. Please take an opportunity to thank them. Any of you who work for nonprofits or who have served on a nonprofit board know how important it is to have a really good board, and I am blessed to have a really good board. They volunteer their time, their brain power, their elbow grease, and they make this mission possible. A final word from me. As I mentioned earlier, Bryan will be on stage here towards the end of the program for a conversation with NPR's Michelle Martin. You can ask a question. If you are Twitter competent. Tweet us now or anytime during the lunch if you've got a question for him, and we'll try and slide that question into the conversation. As you eat, you'll see some slides projected on the screen here that tell you a little more about the Alabama Humanities Alliance and what we do. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. Thanks.
So this is the hardest part. You either come while lunch is being served, or you stand in between lunch getting ready to be served. So thank you for quieting down. Thank you, thank you. It's a pleasure and a sincere honor to be with you as we recognize two outstanding leaders whose legacies of service, sacrifice, and dedication serve as an inspiration to generations while creating greater equity for more people in Alabama and beyond. So on behalf of Regions President and CEO John Turner, members of our executive leadership team, our Montgomery leadership team, I want to welcome you to this event. Regions Bank is proud to sponsor the Alabama Colloquium, and we are especially excited to see so many of you in attendance today. We are trying to get back to the normal pre-COVID, so we appreciate you being here. At Regions, we believe in creating more inclusive prosperity and removing barriers to success. That's more than a goal. It's a commitment. As a financial institution, we believe we can, should, and must leverage our resources and experience in ways that uplift more people. We want to reach those who have been marginalized, who have been underserved, or who haven't had access to the same opportunities to succeed. It is our belief that when we work with community partners, including Alabama Humanities Alliance, we can come together to create the inclusive prosperity that makes Montgomery, Alabama, and all the communities stronger. Because of the dedication of the late Congressman John Lewis, Bryan Stevenson, and other brave, noble men and women, tremendous strides have been made. And because of their legacies, we have an inspiration for how we all can do more. And yes, I said all, because no organization can address our challenges and opportunities alone. It takes a united commitment among people in this room and our peers across the state as we stand together, raise our voices, and commit to creating positive change. We live in challenging times, but it's important to look around here in the room today and be reminded that we have powerful allies who share a common goal of a more equitable, prosperous society. Through volunteerism, financial support, activism, and more, people are seeing the results we can create when people and organizations come together to make a difference. And as we stand united, that is a direct testament to the leadership of John Lewis, who was first a trailblazer in the fight for civil rights here in Alabama, and later as an esteemed congressman who served his district in Georgia and inspired a nation for many decades and for many decades to come. Our unity is also a testament to Bryan Stevenson, who has dedicated his career to helping the poor, the incarcerated, and the condemned. He has reminded us to look at people not through the lens of their challenges, but rather with an eye toward their potential. He has reminded us that when we address injustices among the most vulnerable in our society, we in turn create a stronger society. Indeed, it can be easy to look at headlines of the day and feel discouraged. But when we consider the legacy of John Lewis, and as we honor the work of Bryan Stevenson, I believe we can find the encouragement that affirms our best days are still to come. Today is a celebration. We honor these men as humanitarians, but they are so much more than that. They are examples of what we can accomplish as individuals and as a united force as we answer the call to serve. I believe you will leave here today inspired and committed more than ever to be a part of the great work. So as we continue our event today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Joe Astrup, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Alabama Humanities Alliance. Joe?
As chair of the board, let me add my own special welcome to all of you on this very beautiful day, and thank you for supporting the important work of the Alabama Humanities Alliance. We are delighted to have the colloquium convene here in Montgomery after a 2-year hiatus, and we're even more elated to be honoring John Lewis and Bryan Stevenson. As Luana said, we hope you will leave this luncheon inspired and eager to become allies in our mission. I have the honor today of recognizing some extraordinary leaders who have helped Alabama Humanities Alliance grow and thrive. The Wayne Greenhouse Service to Humanities Award was created to honor current and past board members who tirelessly work on behalf of the Alabama Humanities Alliance to have a positive impact on our organization and our state. We are honoring 2 individuals today, a current board member and a board member who recently completed her term. Trey Granger is the immediate past chair of the Alabama Humanities Alliance, serving 2 terms, and was instrumental in guiding the Alliance through a time of change as we sought to find a new executive director with the vision and dedication to move us forward through the COVID-19 pandemic. Thankfully, Trey, you led us to make wise choices, and a very wise choice. Trey serves as Deputy Clerk of Courts for the United States District Court here in Montgomery and gives his time to other nonprofits and civic interests in Montgomery and across the state. Trey continues to serve on the Executive Committee of the Alliance and is leading a special committee to renovate, update, and upgrade the Alabama Book Festival. I have no doubt it's going to be fantastic. Trey, please come forward and accept the Wayne Greenhouse Award. Sorry, it took a while.
Before I say thank you for this wonderful gesture, let me say when I walked in the front door and saw the centerpieces, how delighted I was to see those sunflowers. And if you don't remember anything I said, you know, may God bless the people of Ukraine. I wondered if it was by serendipity or planned, but knowing my dear friend Alma, who was in charge of the flowers, it had to be planned. Thank you, Alma. Let me first say that to receive this kind gesture is humbling, and I really appreciate this wonderful, wonderful gesture, because this organization means so much to me and has become to mean so much to my family and me over the last 6 to 8 years. And we're really, as Chuck said, no longer an organization, but an alliance. An alliance that really acts as a prism for all the wonderful things that happen culturally across this great state. We try to embody the vision of Dr. King, who talked about the beloved community, and also the great society that President Johnson put in place in the 60s. That prism through this alliance really helps us understand who we are. And as an organization, we want to make sure that we continue to do that for years and years. I'm often asked what I do for the federal courts. The first time I asked, I really didn't know how to answer a job description. And after being asked several times, I finally decided that the best answer would be, I manage expectations. And as serving as chair of this organization, there was really no time for on-the-job training for managing expectations either. But in managing those expectations, we began to look at a new annual event, more so than a tired annual meeting, and how do we lift high the conversation, sometimes hard conversations, but important conversations that talks about who we are as Alabamians. And that conversation really is reflected in an icon that I think is on our program. But we looked at various icons, and I could think of nothing more fitting than the Capitol Rotunda. And it was kind of met with resistance at first, but I really wasn't talking about the exterior of the rotunda, but the interior. Take the time to go to the state capitol and look inside that rotunda. And as you look up, you'll see murals that can be interpreted as divisive. But just above that mural, oddly enough, are 12 interlocking gilded gold rings. And right above those golden rings that are all locked together in solidarity is a beautiful prismed stained glass window that lets light into that rotunda. And as we bring this conversation every year, Alabama's conversation, front and center, I hope it will bring light to all that we are and hope to be in Alabama. Thank you.
Trey, congratulations. And thank you for all that you do for Alabama Humanities Alliance. I want to point out that this award, created in 2012, is named in memory of the late Wayne Greenhaw, an acclaimed writer and journalist who chronicled the civil rights movement and the changing American South. Wayne also served on the Alabama Humanities Alliance board. Wayne authored 22 books, and among them, the highlights of his career, he received the Harper Lee Award for Alabama's Distinguished Writer in 2006. The fact that this award has Wayne Greenhaw's name on it makes this recognition even more special. Our board has chosen to bestow the award to Sally Greenhaw. Sally is a retired circuit judge here in Montgomery County, recently completed 3 terms on the AHA board, where she served with enthusiasm and distinction. Sally and Wayne enjoyed a long and happy marriage before he passed away in 2011. When Sally joined the Alabama Humanities Alliance board, she brought with her her own spirit and dedication to the work, while also carrying on Wayne's important legacy with love and devotion. We are all richer for it. So it's a true honor for me to invite Sally Greenhaw to take the stage and receive the Wayne Greenhaw Service to the Humanities Award.
First of all, Chuck told me I had 1 minute to respond. That's what happens when you're no longer in office. But first of all, I want to thank the board for honoring me today with this award. It's been a pleasure working with you over the years, as well as the staff. And in fact, some of you were on the board when Wayne was on the board. And I've seen some prior honorees here today, and I know what good company I'm in. Finally, I want to say, just to be on the same program honoring our John Lewis and Bryan Stevenson, that in itself is an honor. And I think that these two gentlemen embody the best of not only what humanities are, but more important, what they can be. Thank you again.
I think I'm gonna get my steps in today. Let's see. So it is now my pleasure to introduce a fellow co-chair of this event, Andy Will, who also serves on the board of directors of the Alabama Humanities. Andy?
Thank you, Luana. It is my pleasure to present an award that has great meaning to this organization and reflects the caring and philanthropic spirit of Alabama. We have a tradition at this event to celebrate an organization that helps Alabama Humanities achieve its goals, but as important, this honor also highlights not only the caring and meaningful work done on behalf of Alabama Humanities, but also for so many other nonprofits and charities around the state. Many great corporations and foundations have received this honor and continue to make a difference for Alabama Humanities. For 2022, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama and its Caring Foundation is the recipient of our charitable organization in the Humanities Award. It is my honor to present the award to representatives of Blue Cross Blue Shield, led by Rebecca Elgin Council, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer. Rebecca?
Well, thank you very much. It is such a pleasure to be here today. And on behalf of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama, it is an honor for me and my colleagues to receive this 2022 Charitable Organization and Humanities Award. The mission of our Caring Foundation is to give back to the community by supporting initiatives that improve the health, the wellness, and the education of all Alabamians. We're proud to support the Alabama Humanities Alliance which provides Alabamians with opportunities for lifelong learning, appreciation for our diverse cultures, and also connections with communities throughout our state. Thank you again for this prestigious recognition. We're very honored today. Thank you.
So as we prepare to recognize our Alabama Humanities Fellows for 2022, I'm proud to present this video of the two remarkable men who we honor today.
Every now and then, there are courageous voices that ring out and call for justice and freedom. And those voices call the courageous to take up the cause for human rights, equality, and a more unified community. Today, we honor two of these courageous individuals. Bryan Stevenson, founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, and the late John Lewis.
Once, they were kids, like me. As children, they experienced segregation and inequities in their communities. What they witnessed moved them to try to create a more equitable and just society. Without the vision of John Lewis, we would not have the freedoms and liberties we take for granted in our country today. As a freedom rider and founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s, and then as a U.S. Congressman for more than 30 years, he tirelessly championed human rights and civic engagement.
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, you have a moral obligation to stand up, do something, say something, and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. You must commit every second, every minute, and every day to standing up, speaking up, and doing something to make our country and make our world better.
Without the determination and leadership of Bryan Stevenson, we would not be called to correct the injustices of the past. His life's work as a human rights attorney and advocate for the incarcerated continues to challenge our legal system and give voice to the most vulnerable members of our society.
I'm persuaded that we've got to get closer to the parts of our community where there's poverty and inequality. We've got to get closer to people in jails and prisons. We've got to get closer to the people coming out of jails and prisons. If we want to do something about racial inequality, we have to go to the places where that racial inequality is most manifest.
It takes extraordinary courage to point out what's wrong in our society and stand up for what's right. John Lewis and Bryan Stevenson demonstrated conviction in the face of ignorance and great opposition.
Through their commitment and actions,
with compassion and empathy for all,
they've helped uphold our nation's Constitution and ensured our laws are just and equitable.
They have showed us a path forward to reconciliation and to a greater sense of community, where we can see and appreciate each other as human beings.
Today, we proudly honor Bryan Stevenson and the late John Lewis as human rights heroes and champions of the humanities. Because of their courage, our world is indeed a better place.
Remarkable lives who deserve remarkable honors. Give them another round of applause, please. So when the Alabama Humanities Alliance was pondering what sort of object to actually hand out at this event, a bit of inspiration struck. Instead of a statue or a plaque, why not a work of the humanities? Why not a poem? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Alabama's Poet Laureate, and may I add, the state's first Black Poet Laureate and its youngest ever, Ashley M. Jones.
Wow, that is an awkwardly long walk. Goodness, but I did not fall. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those who responded. I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here with you today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of a celebration of two heroes, two freedom fighters. When we think about the story of this nation, we have to know that the movements that keep us moving forward, that keep us moving toward liberation for all people, often begin in the South, often Alabama. This place is full of that spirit which moved in the late John Lewis. It moves in Bryan Stevenson. And I hope that spirit continues to move as we enter new decades of struggle, of challenges here and abroad, and of what I hope is our shared desire to truly see this world become equitable. This poem that I wrote, which is a sonnet, is one that I wrote especially for this occasion, celebrating these two incredible men and their contributions to the freedom struggle. It's called Freedom Sermon, Alabama, USA. It begins with two quotes, one from each of the honorees. Why do we want to kill all the broken people? What is wrong with us that we think a thing like that can be right? Bryan Stevenson, Just Mercy. You are a light. You are the light. John Lewis, Across That Bridge, A Vision for Change and the Future of America. The chickens knew. Their blood in the soil knew when it spilled, when it curdled in the pan, that there was a movement brewing in you, John. They heard you speak God's word, the right man for the job by far. The chickens knew, yes, but so did the bull, the hose, Sweet Dixie, and the U.S. president, too. Oh, blessed freedom fighters who unfix the chains and prison bars, stripes rough and unjust on a flag sewn with blood. Bryan, when did you learn that dollars grease the system's rust and fill the cells to bursting? God forbid the least of us unite. Now we must fight. The thing they cannot bury is the light. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That powerful poem has been engraved and framed as our gift to Bryan Stevenson and to the Lewis family as a lasting memory of this event and our gratitude for their lives and service. Now later, Bryan Stevenson will sit down with NPR's Michelle Martin for a conversation. But before that, we want to present him with the honor. And it is only fitting that the recognition be delivered by a fellow Alabama Humanities Fellow. It is my pleasure to introduce award-winning journalist and Monroeville native Cynthia Tucker, who in 2015 was named an Alabama Humanities Fellow. Cynthia.
Good afternoon. It is quite the honor for me to be here with you this afternoon to present this award to Bryan Stevenson, to honor him as one of the Alabama Humanities Fellows of 2022. As you heard, a few years ago, I was granted the same honor but my accomplishments pale in comparison to his. When I was a child, growing up in Monroeville, my home state was known nationally and internationally for many of the wrong things. The two men that we honor here today have helped my home state to be known nationally and internationally for many of the right things. I was telling Bryan earlier that recently I quoted something that he wrote in Just Mercy. I am from Monroeville, a Monroeville native, as you heard. I have read To Kill a Mockingbird several times. I know all about it. His memoir, Just Mercy, has as its centerpiece a case of injustice from my home. In that, where a man was not only convicted of a crime he did not commit, but put on death row before there was even a trial. In the book, he writes, Monroeville loved the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, but seemed to have missed some of its lessons. I also heard a friend of mine quote something else he has said often, where he talks about proximity, being close to those that we are trying to help and to serve, the marginalized. I was at a dinner just with girlfriends, escaping our children, over dinner and drinks, when one of them talked about the charitable work that she is trying to do, that she wanted to be in proximity to those she was trying to help, just as Bryan Stevenson had said. I am quoting you because I want you to know that your work and your wisdom and your words have impact broader than you know. My heartiest congratulations on your award. I will bring it to you because I think is the family of John Lewis coming next? Okay, well then in that case, I'll bring you your award and you will take the stage a little later. So we will hear some more of his remarkable wisdom.
Okay, this is my last time. Let's see where we are. And now, another Alabama Humanities Fellow, class of 2017, the Honorable John Myron Thompson, is an exceptional Alabamian. His title is Senior United States District Judge, but that only tells part of the story of this remarkable man who grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama, and went on to Yale to earn undergraduate and law degrees at a time when few African Americans made it to the Ivy League. He returned to an Alabama law practice until Jimmy Carter chose him to fill an important seat on the bench, where he served from 1980. Judge Thompson?
It's a real pleasure to be here. I hope you'll bear with me. I'm going to digress for a minute about Cynthia Tucker's comments about Monroeville, Alabama. I have to admit I have a little pet peeve. And Everybody talks about Atticus Finch. We have a black Atticus Finch in Bryan Stevenson. You don't have to go to literature. You don't have to write a novel. The man exists today. He is not a fiction. He is real. And when I hear people talk about Atticus Finch, I say, why a novel? The blood is here. Anyway, I'm getting totally off point. Anyway, I am truly honored to be here to receive and to give this award for someone like John Lewis. My only gripe is that I have to follow his remarks. I mean, no one upstages John Lewis. And how do you summarize his life? I mean, you know, the number of times he was beaten in the name of justice, in the name of writing. And then his famous quote about, good trouble, necessary trouble. I can't top those lines. I mean, I just wondered what it is about him that I could say. And it ends up that I do have a story about John Lewis that until this day has never been shared. And I honestly believe that this story epitomizes everything he said on that screen. In 2011, we had at the American Courthouse, and part of the United States District Courthouse, we call it America's Courtroom, a meeting between, can you believe this? John Lewis and Governor Patterson. Wow, you're right. John Lewis was ruthlessly beaten at that bus station. John Patterson was the governor who many think was responsible either directly but at least by nonfeasance in that beating. And the question is, what would John Lewis do? And this is his brilliance. And I had no idea what that was going to be like. He met actually in the library of my chambers. There also were 6 other freedom riders who also had been brutally beaten. But I think we were all waiting for the cue from John Lewis. And you know what he did? When Governor Patterson walked into the room, and I'll be honest with you, I was concerned as to whether John Lewis could shake the man who was responsible for his beating. He did. He shook Governor Patterson's hand. He grabbed him by the shoulder, and he welcomed him in. And he sat down with him, and he broke bread. We had lunch together. Now, what does that say about John Lewis? What that says is something he said as one of the last, I believe it may have been the last sentence in an article he wrote in the New York Times editorial on the date, actually, I believe it was on as an obituary in the Times that day. He says, I want to continue the struggle for justice, and I want to end hatred. His capacity for forgiveness, for clemency, for the ability to take his biggest enemy into his arms and say, I forgive you, was beyond measurement. How could anybody do that? I even had questions about whether I could shake Governor Patterson's hand. But I'm sure you're sitting there and asking yourself, why? Why would he shake the hand of someone who had brutally beaten him, not once, but at several of these stops as he was riding these buses throughout the South? I think that his ability for forgiveness was central to his belief in peaceful resistance. But the only thing that was greater than his ability to forgive was his ability not to forget. The two go hand in hand. I think that in truth, what he's saying is that hate saps us of our energy to move forward and do the right thing. If we get so caught up in hatred, we lose the energy to move forward. And I think that as he left that meeting with Governor Patterson, he said, "I forgive you, but I will not forget to undo all of the wrongs that you have done. Because my energy now is in doing the right thing, not wasting my time hating you. I forgive you." And that's his life. He had this ability to forgive, but also this incredible lifetime ability never to forget, and on his deathbed saying, "I will fight for voting rights. I won't spend my time hating Wallace. I won't spend my time hating Patterson. I'm going to spend my time fighting in Congress for doing the right thing." And I think it's a great lesson. And I think that's his whole point about peaceful resistance. I know that John Lewis's family is here, and I'd like for them to come up, if you wouldn't mind. These are his two nieces, am I correct? That's correct. Well, why don't you tell us who you are, if you don't mind?
Well, my name is Rhonda Tyner. My mother is John's sister, Ethel.
Okay, and another niece?
Hi, my name is Arnika Lewis, and my father is Samuel Lewis.
Very good. And I keep getting these two confused. The cousin and the nephew. Right. The cousin, please come. Well, the brothers will save for last. Okay.
My name is Ron Lewis, and my father's name is Freddie.
Thank you. And?
Armand Carter, first cousin of John Lewis.
Thank you. Right. Now, I remember in the poem that, was it gorgeous? You mentioned chickens, and we all know that John Lewis preached to chickens. Anyone who's ever heard that story. So I wanted to ask these brothers whether he really did preach to chickens. And I believe you said, sir, that it's true, and you heard the sermons. Here you go.
And by the way, that was some good chicken we had for lunch. Yeah, I heard John speak to the chicken many a time, and I heard him talk about speaking to the chicken, and the chicken would bow their heads. Sometimes his colleagues wouldn't do it in Congress, but they understood. But it's been a good day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And his other brother. Thank you.
My name is Henry Lewis. I'm the youngest brother of the late Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you. Well, did you want to add a little something? Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Please do. Please do.
I would like to, good evening. I would like to say thank you to the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and thank the Honorable Bryan H. Thompson for choosing the late Congressman as one of the Alabama Humanities Fellows of 2022. And as a member of the Lewis family, we have created the John Robert Lewis Legacy Institute. We know that he left us a platform to stand on, and we want to take that because we got a chance to witness his life, his legacy. Actually, we consider ourselves part of his legacy. So we want to continue that effort to make a change, because he worked his entire life for change. He saw something that was not right. He felt he had a moral obligation to say something, to do something, and he worked really hard in doing that. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you stole some of my
Your thunder?
remarks, but it's good. It was all true.
Well, let me say this. If I stole some of your thunder, that's a real honor to me.
That's good. They often called my brother, at least the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did, the boy from Troy. Right. I think he should have been called the forgiver, because he had this uncanny ability, as you have just stated, to forgive people. He would forgive people for the most grievous things that they could do. The state trooper that beat him almost to death on the Edmonds Pettus Bridge contacted him, went to his office in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, and asked him for forgiveness. And it was on CNN, on national TV. He said that I forgive you because hatred is too heavy of a burden to bear. And I thought, what a symbol of forgiveness. I told my brother one time, I think if he stepped on a nail and it stuck a hole in his feet, I think he might would tell the nail, I forgive you, because he was just that kind of person. He could forgive you for the worst things you could possibly do. So on behalf of the Lewis family, thank you all so much for honoring the late Congressman John Lewis. I hope we can represent his legacy as well as he's presented it to the world. Again, thank you so much.
Very good.
Okay.
Oh. You know, two thoughts come to mind, and then I'm going to shut up. Joan Mooney is here from Faith in Politics, which was an incredible organization that John Lewis led in our U.S. House and Representatives in our Congress that would come down here, and it was part of his moral crusade. You know, I noticed he called it Faith in Politics, not Faith in Legacy, Faith in Politics. And the two to him meant the same. And as I was coming up here, I was thinking, thinking about the faith and politics, that, he was unique. I don't know what religion you are, but he is one of the few people about whom I can say he was a Christian, but he also lived the life of a Christian, and those are not necessarily the same thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge, and thank you to the Lewis family. We have been well fed, both with food and with the spirit, with these great presentations. I would like to now ask NPR's Michelle Martin and Bryan Stevenson to go ahead and take your places on the stage. I'm going to take care of a little business while y'all are settling in. As we mentioned, Judge Thompson and Cynthia Tucker are Alabama Humanities Fellows. I believe there are some other fellows with us here today, and I want to recognize them. And if you stand up when I call your name, Dr. Martha Boyer, Dr. Ed Bridges, Dr. Bert Hitchcock, and Peggy Wallace Kennedy. Thank you all for being here. Some of you may know that I was a journalist before I became a nonprofit leader, and I had the great pleasure of working with Michelle Martin at NPR on sometimes a lot of long days and some long nights. I was thrilled when she agreed to join us today for this conversation with Bryan Stevenson. Michelle is one of the best in the business. She's also a true friend, and she's one of the smartest people I know. And she's no stranger to this event. She said yes also in 2017 and 2019 and was part of the colloquium then. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to once again present Bryan Stevenson in conversation with NPR's Michelle Martin.
Thank you all so much for being here. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Just to, and can you hear Mr. Stevenson?
Hello, hello, yes.
Perfect. Okay, we are so delighted to spend this time with you. Chuck, thanks for pointing out, people always ask us, they said, oh, is this your first time in Montgomery? And I am delighted to say, no, it is not. I've been here many times, and I'm so delighted to see old friends, and I'm so delighted to meet new friends, and I'm especially honored to have this opportunity to speak with you, Bryan Stevenson, and congratulations on this wonderful honor. And I'm so moved by the fact that you've been honored many times for your legal work, but I'm wondering what it means to you to be honored for the humanities, which has such a powerful meaning.
Yeah, well, this is, first of all, a great day for me to be honored on the same program with someone like John Lewis is just overwhelming. He was such a mentor, and he was so generous, and spending time with him was so inspiring to me, and we got to talk a lot, particularly in the last few years, and I was just curious about his whole life, and he told me about growing up in Pike County and the lessons he learned there, but he also told me that you have to keep fighting. And so I'm really honored by this, and I have to say how moved I was by that beautiful poem. Ms. Jones, thank you for those kind and incredible words and for your brilliant mind. But it means the world because I feel like the humanities are essential to how we move forward, you know, how we think about these issues, these complex issues. It's often difficult without all access to the humanities. I mean, I feel like I'm the product of a generation of people. I stand on the shoulders of people who did so much more with so much less. And the pandemic has caused me to think more about the people who lived here, you know, a generation ago, who would put on their Sunday best and go places to protest and fight for voting rights. And they knew when they got there, they'd be on their knees praying, and they were going to get battered and bloodied and beaten, and yet they still went. And the courage of that conviction really does inspire me, and it's what makes this kind of recognition so precious and so wonderful. So I'm really deeply honored by this.
It is interesting, though. I'm imagining when you first arrived here, I think, you know, people may not remember that you've been here so long, you've lived here so long, that you were not born here. You're actually born in Delaware, you were educated elsewhere. Did you honestly think you'd be here this long?
You know, it's embarrassing, but I never thought about the future in terms of my own personal career when I was doing the work. I just, you know, I knew that there were these critical needs. When I went to Georgia for the first time and met people on death row who were literally dying for legal assistance, and I felt like maybe I could contribute to that, I said, I have to do that. And when the needs in Alabama were so acute in 1989, 25% of the people executed nationally were here in the state of Alabama. We were getting desperate calls from people who didn't have lawyers, who had execution dates. I just felt, well, maybe I can help with that, so I've got to do that. And it just, I never had a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. I just felt that I had to do the work where it needed to be done. And so, no, I didn't imagine that. And in fact, you know, I was just kind of living this temporary existence and began to deal with the realities, because back in those days it was hard. I mean, in 1989, our bulletin board, which is a publication that prints housing notices, still printed notices that had racial restrictions on them, even though that was invalid. And I remember trying to find a place to live and going to a neighborhood and showing up, and people would say no, no, and I found this place. I remember it was a hot August day. I found a place, and you know, when the woman answered the phone, I kind of did something I don't usually do. I humiliated myself by saying, oh, I'm a lawyer, and I went to Harvard Law School. I'll be a great tenant. And she said, you sound great. And I went over to see her, and I remember putting on a suit because I wanted to make this impression, because I'd been having these issues, and I even borrowed someone's eyeglasses that I didn't need because I thought the eyeglasses made me somehow, more harmless or something. I don't know. And I still remember opening the door. She opened the door. It was an older white woman, and she said, "Oh my God, you're black. I'm not going to rent to somebody who's black." And I think the hard thing for me was I wasn't dealing with housing issues. I had to deal with the issues that I was dealing with, and I struggled at that moment in whether this could be home, this could be community, when I was kind of dealing with that. But then I met other people who were so extraordinary, people like Johnny Carr and people like Reverend Gratz and people who were just doing incredible things. And that's why for me to be on this stage here in the city of Montgomery at this moment, being celebrated like this, is really overwhelming, but it's also deeply affirming about what we can do together as a community. That was the Montgomery in my lifetime in 1989, and I see us all here today. And that's why I feel like this work, this fight, this struggle is so vital, it's so important, because I feel like not only have things gotten to a place where I can see things that I couldn't see before, I think we can all see things that we haven't seen before, and that's the encouraging part.
But isn't that crazy, though? The fact that, I just have to pause and process the fact that this is not when dinosaurs walked the earth. No. I mean, this was when that kind of conduct was illegal, and everybody knew it was illegal, and yet it persists. And I'm wondering if, I'm just going to pause for a minute and ask all of you to think of a moment in your lifetime, that you did not think you would see. And let's just have that moment together. Let's just take a moment to think about a moment in our lifetimes that we never thought we'd see, and celebrate that together. And then I want to ask you, Trey was kind enough to point out that the sunflowers on your table, sunflowers are the national flower of Ukraine, in case you were wondering why he referenced that. So Trey, thank you for that. Do you see a connection between the work you're doing here and what we are tragically experiencing overseas?
I do. I think that much of my work is a response to what I call the politics of fear and anger. In the 1970s, we had 250,000 people, early 70s, 250,000 people in our jails and prisons. Today, we have 2.3 million people in our prisons. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We have nearly 5 million people on probation or parole. There are 70 million Americans that now have criminal arrest histories, which means that when they try to get jobs or they try to get loans, they're disfavored and sometimes banned by that arrest history. 1 in 3 black male babies is projected to go to jail or prison during his lifetime. And I say all of that because I think that was created by governance rooted in fear and anger. We had politicians in the 70s and 80s that said that people who are drug addicted and drug dependent are criminals, and we're going to use the criminal legal system to deal with that population, when we should have said that people struggling with addiction and dependency have a health problem and we need a healthcare response. And I believe that when you allow yourself to be governed by fear and anger, you tolerate things you should never tolerate. You accept things you should never accept. We have 13 states in America that have no minimum age for trying a child as an adult. So I'm representing 9 and 10-year-old kids in the state of Florida who are facing 50-year prison sentences in adult prisons.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now. And we put children in these spaces where they're attacked. And I don't think anyone can actually justify that or believes that that's right, but we tolerate it because we've been made to feel afraid or angry. And the only way that bigotry, the only way that violence, the only way that discrimination prevails is when we feel too afraid or too angry to do the things we know we're supposed to do. And I think globally, we're seeing the same phenomenon. We're seeing parts in the world where people are being abused and mistreated because of their ethnicity, because of their gender, because of their religion. And wherever you go and you see abuse of other people, the perpetrators of that abuse can give you a narrative of fear and anger. And that's what we're hearing out of Russia. We're hearing a narrative that says, oh no, we have to do this to protect ourselves because we're afraid all of these terrible things are going to happen, or we're angry about lands that have been lost. And we're not talking about the basic rights of a whole community of people who are living peaceably on our borders. And we will tolerate that kind of incursion, that kind of invasion. We will tolerate abuse of people if we allow fear to cause us to be silent, or anger about our own issues to cause us to be indifferent. And so I do see a connection. The civil rights movement was about getting people to get past their fear of integration. And I just think we've now learned some things that ought to kind of teach us that that fear was not only irrational, but it should have been unacceptable. You know, why were we so hostile to the idea that black kids and white kids could be in the same space? You know, I've been telling the story recently about when I was a kid. My dad used to do domestic work, and he would take us places, and we, you know, would help him clean. We didn't really help. I was terrible at cleaning. I was just there. I wasn't, you know, really helping. But we lived near the beach, and you'd see all of these other kids in the hotel pools and things like that. And my sister and I just created this. We were preoccupied with swimming pools. And when integration came, they had a swimming pool in our community, the public pool. Black kids couldn't go there. And when integration came, they closed the pool, as they did throughout most of the South. And one day my mom came home and said, I've been saving money, and we're going to take a bus trip to the new Disney World, had just opened in Florida. This is early 70s. And we were so excited. And then my mom said, and we're going to stay in a hotel, and you're going to get in a swimming pool. And my sister and I were as excited about the swimming pool as we were about Disney World. And when the bus showed up and we got on the bus, and my sister and I, we put our swimming trunks on underneath our clothes so we'd be ready for the pool. And we got to South Carolina where we stayed, and when that bus parked, I mean, we jumped off the bus and we ran and we found the pool. It was big and glorious. There were about 8 white kids in the pool. We didn't pay any attention to them. I was so happy that we had our trunks on underneath our clothes, and we ripped off our clothes. And I remembered saying to my sister, I said, Christy, I'm going to count to 3. We'll jump really high, and we'll land in the pool. And I grabbed her hand and I said, 1, 2, 3. And we jumped high in the air, and we landed in the pool, and it was the most extraordinary feeling, that weightlessness, the coldness, the joy. It was so much fun. I still remember the joy of it. And we were so disoriented, we didn't pay attention to the shouting that had started. But the parents of these other children had started shouting at their kids, get out of the pool, get out of the pool, get out of the water. And I didn't understand what was happening, and they were screaming. And finally, there was one little kid left in the pool, a little 6-year-old boy. And this big guy, presumably his dad, started walking to the water, and he went over to this little boy, and he snatched him by the arm and pulled him out. And the little boy started crying. And I just didn't understand what was happening. And I remember turning to that man and looking at him and saying, excuse me, but what's wrong? And that's when this man looked at me and he said, you're wrong, nigger. And it wasn't the first time someone had used that word with me. But it just stunned me because it came after so much joy. Mm. They left and they were complaining about the kids, us getting in the pool, and I thought we were going to get in trouble. And I remember getting out of the pool and finding my mom and telling my mom what happened. She wasn't paying attention until I told her what the man said. And when I told her that, she got angry, and she said, are those people still near the pool? Mm-hmm. I said, no, I don't think so. She said, well, you get back in that pool. And at this point, we really didn't want to get in the pool anymore. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, you get back in that pool. And we did. And I went back and got in the pool. And then we went to Disney World the next day. We had fun. I remember the rides. I remember the food. But the thing I remember the most about that trip was getting back in that pool, holding my sister's hand, standing in a corner, and desperately trying not to cry. Mm-hmm. And as we got older, we had to shift that memory, as many people of color in this country have had to do, to overcome the humiliation and the denial of basic humanity that comes with segregation. And we changed the memory. I would say to my sister, I'd say, Christy, remember that time we went to South Carolina and we made those white people get out of the pool? And my sister would say, yeah, I remember that time, and she would really embellish it. If our friends were around, she'd say to our friends, she'd say, yeah, y'all, we went down to South Carolina, and I got on the edge of that pool. I said, all y'all white people get out of the pool. And then we would laugh because it was easier to carry the memory contained in that package than the actual package. But recently, I've been thinking about what were we afraid of in this country, in this community, when we said that these children can't be with these children. What were we afraid of? Because we need to understand the way fear works if we're going to make sure we don't replicate that. And I remember what happened on that day. And my biggest concern is that I worry that the white kids in that pool that day don't remember the day that their parents made them get out of a pool because 2 little black kids got in the water. I worry that they haven't talked about that. I worry that the man doesn't remember what he said to me. And if you're not required to remember the things like that, then you're vulnerable to replicating them today. And that is why it is so urgent that we confront the fear that we see around us, that we overcome those things. And these projects that we're doing are about memory, but more than that, they're about understanding the way in which we cannot be governed by fear, and we cannot be governed by anger. And authoritarianism is rising all over the globe, and it's rising here. And we have to recognize that that it poses. And so, yes, I do see a connection between what's happening in Ukraine and what our work is.
Well, one of the remarkable things that's happening in Ukraine and indeed with Russia is this effort to own the memory, to rewrite the past. I mean, central to the Russian invasion is a false narrative of history, that the Ukrainians are not people, that they do not deserve to exist, despite the fact that they have their own history, their own language, their own culture, and their own desire to govern themselves. I mean, this is, you know, even just last week, the president of Russia issued a statement saying that Ukraine does not exist, does not have a right to exist. And I asked one of the scholars that I've been speaking to over the course of the week, is this a received history? Is this something that he was grown up thinking? Was he raised thinking that? I mean, were the children of his era in Russia all told that these people don't have a history and have no right to exist? And what he said was, yes, but he's taken it to a whole other level. Now, you know where I'm going with this, obviously, which is that we are in a moment when there are jurisdictions around the country who are literally trying to outlaw knowledge. They are taking books off the shelves. They're taking newspaper articles and outlawing the teaching of newspaper articles, which is quite remarkable to me that a thought experiment, the 1619 Project, which is a thought experiment, is a work of journalism, is somehow so dangerous and so powerful that it must be outlawed. Yeah. And I'm interested in your take on the origins of this movement, and what do you think it's about?
Well, I do think it is about creating a false narrative that allows people to not confront difficult truths. I mean, nobody's going to, you know, subject themselves to chemotherapy or radiation treatment just because. But if you get a diagnosis that you have a life-threatening cancer, you will actually make those choices. And we've skipped the diagnosis part in understanding our history. We haven't allowed people to talk honestly about all of the harm and all of the injury that was done when we tolerated a genocide of indigenous people. I think we're a post-genocide society. I think what happened to Native people in this country was genocide. When Europeans came, we killed millions, and famine and war and disease shaped the lives of this community, and we shielded them from the equality and justice that we talk about in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, but by creating a narrative, a false narrative, that they are racially different and therefore undeserving of these promises. And that narrative of racial differences is what we then use to tolerate 2.5 centuries of slavery. And that's why truth-telling is so important, because if you don't hear the truth, you become vulnerable to these manipulations. Most people in this room, a lot of people in this room, like I did, grew up in a time where your history textbooks referred to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression, where slavery was taught as benign, that enslaved people were happy.
Part of the family.
Part of the family. And if we're not careful, we'll begin to adopt narratives around even the civil rights era. Sometimes I hear people talking about civil rights, and it sounds like a 3-day carnival. On day 1, Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat on a bus. On day 2, Dr. King led a march on Washington. On day 3, we changed the laws and racism was over. And it would be great if that was our history, but that's not our history.
What do you say to people who think they're doing the right thing? Because clearly, many of the people advancing these efforts, you know, some people advancing these efforts are autocrats looking for power. I think that's, I'm sorry, I'm just going to assert that. But I think some people really genuinely think they're doing the right thing, of protecting their children from something painful that they feel they didn't have anything to do with. And why should they have to be burdened with these uncomfortable feelings? What do you say to that?
I say that the truth of who we are as a nation cannot be understood if we don't know all that we are. all that we've been. That's true for every society. And we can't skip that in America just because there's the use of power that can sometimes facilitate that. I mean, I think that's the difference between us and other countries. If you go to South Africa, they have an apartheid museum that talks honestly about the experience of apartheid. They had a truth and reconciliation process following apartheid where the truth of the pain and anguish of apartheid could not be diminished. And so it's in the air. It's part of the official record of what happened in that country. And you see that in Germany. If you go to Berlin, Germany, you can't go 200 meters without seeing markers and stones that have been placed next to the homes of Jewish families. All of those homes are being recognized, and they're places of honor for Jewish communities. The Holocaust Memorial sits in the center of Berlin, and when you go there, the cab drivers and the hotel operators encourage everybody to go to the Holocaust Memorial. And as a consequence, in Germany, there are no Adolf Hitler statues. It'd be unconscionable for someone to say, oh, let's honor the architects and perpetrators of the Third Reich and the Holocaust. But they had a shift in power in Germany. Germans lost the war. Black majority took over in South Africa. In this country, there hasn't been a shift in power. And so the debate is different. It's difficult because we actually have to persuade people who feel like they have the power to silence to choose not to be silent. And that's the genius, in my judgment, of John Lewis and Rosa Parks, is that they have made a moral argument to people that even though you have the power to silence others, you should not do it because it will make you vulnerable to living lives of fear and anger. You'll be separated from people who could enhance your life, who could bring quality to your life, who can bring beauty to your life. I come from a faith tradition, and in my tradition, we understand that you can't skip the truth part to get to redemption. I believe in truth and reconciliation, and truth and restoration, and truth and redemption, and truth and reparation, but I believe those things are sequential. You got to tell the truth before you get to the R part. And if you come to my church, you can't say, oh, I want heaven and salvation and redemption, but I don't want to own up to anything. I'm not going to acknowledge anything. The preachers are going to say, no, it doesn't work like that. You've got to confess and repent, and you shouldn't fear it, because when you open your heart like that, that's when redemption comes in. That's John Lewis's genius. He actually created space for people to actually do those things. And so what I want to say to those folks who are trying to keep us ignorant, who want to ban books about Rosa Parks and Dr. King and John Lewis, I would say you should not be afraid, because if you continue to live in fear, you will not thrive. You can't survive. I mean, I genuinely believe that the kind of truth that we're talking about, the truth that is represented in this room, where you have black people and white people and young people and old people all sitting together, all starting to feel something about what we can do in this city, in this state, the truth of that, the truth of an Alabama that breaks down the racial barriers, that wipes away all of that false narrative, that gives up on the lost cause, that stops honoring people who are white supremacists, that begins to think about how we create healthy communities. The truth of that is too great a truth to ultimately overcome. And that's why I believe I want to say to them, I understand your fear, and there was fear before you, and there was fear before that, but we need to learn from that fear that it's not sustainable, it's not rational, it's not healthy for me, and it's not healthy for you either. Because I think we did really terrible things to white children in this state when we told them that they're better than black kids because of their color, when told them that you shouldn't be with those people because they're different. That's a recipe for abuse and dysfunction. And it's not consistent with health. And that's ultimately what I'm hoping we can do, is to show people that we're really about a healthy community, and even a beloved community, where we can actually experience love with one another without the burden of bigotry, without the pain of discrimination, and without the violence of injustice.
I want to remind you that you can participate in our conversation. I'm told that questions will be coming our way soon. And why don't we do that now and open it up now, because then I want to talk a little bit more, and then give Mr. Stevenson an opportunity to give us a closing thought. So, great, thank you. All right, perfect. Oh, these are some good ones, thank you. You never know. Someone wants to know, when did you find your calling, and how did you know?
Oh, wow. As I've said before, I grew up in a community where black kids couldn't go to the public schools, and lawyers came into the community to make them open up the public schools. And I was struck with the power they had, because if you had a vote in my community, the majority of the community would have voted against racial integration. And so I wanted to be a lawyer in part because I love the power lawyers have to protect disfavored people, even when the majority of people don't want to protect those people. So I went to law school. I'd never met a lawyer until I got to Harvard Law School. And I was really struggling because it didn't seem like in my first year people were talking about equality or justice or race or poverty. I went to the School of Government to get a public policy degree that was even worse. They were teaching us to maximize benefits and minimize costs, and I was really struggling. And then I took a course that required me to spend a month with a human rights organization. I went to Atlanta, Georgia, to work with Steve Bright and a group called the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, and they represented people on death row. They sent me down to Georgia's death row as a law student to meet people, and I was just supposed to explain that, you know, to this one person, you're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year. And I drove down there. I was so nervous because I felt totally unqualified. I'd never been to death row, never been to a maximum prison. They took me back to the visitation area. They brought this man into the room. He had all of these chains. He had shackles on his wrist, a chain around his waist, shackles on his ankles. And I remember being so nervous that I just started babbling. I just said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just a law student. I don't know anything about the death penalty. I don't know anything about criminal procedure. I don't know anything about appellate procedure. I don't know anything about civil procedure. And his face was just dropping more and more as I kept saying what I don't know. And then I said, but I did come here to tell you that you're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year. And that's when this man stopped. He said, wait, say that again. I said, you're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year. And he said, wait, say that again. I said, you're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year. And I remember that man grabbed my hands and he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. He said, you're the first person I've met in the 2 years I've been on death row who's not a death row prisoner or a death row guard. He said, I've been talking to my wife and kids, but I haven't let them come and visit because I was afraid I'd have an execution date and I didn't want them to have to deal with that. He said, because of you, I'm going to see my wife, I'm going to see my kids. And we just started talking, and even though I was only scheduled to be there an hour, it turned into 3 hours. I just kept talking. He was asking me questions, I was asking him questions. We were exactly the same age, we had the same birthday, same month, same day, same year. And we just kept talking, and the guards were so angry that I'd stayed past my time that after 3 hours they came bursting into the room, and they were angry, and they grabbed this man, they threw him against the wall, they pulled his arms back, they put the handcuffs on his wrist, they wrapped the chain around his waist, they put the shackles on his ankles, and I was begging them to be gentler because they were so violent. I said, look, it's my fault, not his fault. But they were just pushing him, and they shoved him toward the door, and I never will forget them trying to push him out the door. And I kept saying, it's my fault, don't. And they were ignoring me. And then this man planted his feet, and as they were about to shove him through the door, he didn't move. And then he turned and he looked at me, and he said, Bryan, don't worry about this, you just come back. And I wrote about this because I watched this man then close his eyes, and then he threw his head back, and then he started to sing. And he started singing this hymn. He started singing, I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I'm onward bound. And then he said, Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. And everybody stopped. And the guards were covered, and they started pushing him down the hallway, and you could hear the chains clinging, but you could also hear this man singing about higher ground. And when I heard that man sing, everything changed for me. That was the moment that I knew I wanted to help condemned people get to higher ground. But more than that, I knew that my journey to higher ground was tied to his journey. I realized that if he doesn't get there, I can't get there. And it radicalized my interest in the law. I went back to Harvard Law School. You couldn't get me out of the law school library. I needed to know everything about federalism and comedy and the doctrines. I needed to equip myself to help condemned people get to higher ground. And that's how I found my calling, was actually standing next to a condemned person and hearing him sing, and in his song, seeing his humanity, seeing his dignity, knowing that his life was worth saving. And that's why I keep talking about proximity, because I believe there's wisdom when we get close to people who suffer. There's power when we get close to people who are marginalized and excluded. There's insight, there's knowledge, and we should do it because we want to be a service to other people. We should also do it for ourselves, because who knows what song you'll hear that will change your life, that will deepen your conviction. Everything I understood before then changed. I grew up in the church, and I began to realize that in a society like ours, the felon Saul might not become the apostle Paul because we throw people away. We condemn and we kill and we execute. And I want to change a society like that because I realize that we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done. I fundamentally believe that. And so that's how, the calling came to me, is because I understood then that even if you're on death row, it's not too late for redemption. It's not too late for grace, that there's still humanity, there's still dignity, and we should be fighting for that wherever we see it.
Well, thank you for that, because you never know who here needed to hear that today. We never know who here was struggling with something today, wondering whether they have a purpose yet. So thank you for that, because who knows who needed to hear that today. We have other questions, so let's get these.
Okay.
And there's a question segueing nicely to this. What's your advice for aspiring law students? And also, someone else wants to know if there is a way that undergraduate students can support this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my basic advice is work hard. We need you to be as smart and as informed as you can possibly be. Really study hard. But I also want to say to each and every one of you that your capacity to make a difference in the world is not completely dependent on the grades you get. It's certainly not dependent on the money you have. I don't think that's the ultimate measure of what empowers you to do the things that need to be done. I tell my students this all the time. I want you to be strategic. I want you to be tactical. I want you to be informed. I want you to be intelligent. I want you to think critically. But I also want you to recognize that if you're going to advance justice, you're not going to advance justice by the ideas in your mind. You advance justice by the conviction in your heart. And that's why you have to care about the relationships you create with the people that are meaningful to you. That's why you shouldn't step away entirely from the communities that motivated you to want to be agents of change. You shouldn't step away from the places where you see suffering and inequality, even though that can be a painful thing. We have in our society the ability to protect ourselves and find safe and comfortable places and to exist disconnected from the things that we know are difficult. And I just say to students all the time, I hope you'll have the courage to not do that. I'm not against comfort. I'm not against convenience. But if you want to do justice, if you want to make a change, if you want to make a difference that can be felt by other people who are vulnerable, you have to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to do things that are inconvenient. John Lewis taught me that sometimes you have to stand up even when people say, sit down. Sometimes you have to speak even when people say, be quiet. But if you understand the power of that, and you have this conviction to contribute to the world, to add love to the world, add justice to the world, add equality and equity to the world, then there's nothing you can't do.
Is that your way of telling us you didn't get very good grades?
I got good grades, but I was never really interested in those kinds of metric systems. I'm not against them. I want people to get good grades because I want them to study hard. I do. I just think I don't want anybody to feel like, well, because I didn't get into that program, or I didn't get into that school, or I didn't make it here, that I'm now out of the game. Because like I said, when I got to Harvard Law School, the first day, everybody stood up and they talked about, why they were in law school. Everybody had at least 2 generations of people in their families who had been lawyers. And I didn't have that. And there was a moment when I didn't tell people I went to a colored school. I didn't think that would help me. I didn't tell people my great-grandparents were enslaved. In that environment, I thought it would diminish me. But as I got a little wiser, I realized that it doesn't diminish me, it actually empowers me. If I'm sitting here doing anything, it's because I understand the pain of segregation. It's because my great-grandparents were enslaved and gave me the legacy of endurance. And so what I want to say to people is don't let the bad grade turn you around or make you think that it's too late for you, because it's not.
What songs and artists inspire you?
Wow. I love music. I love all kinds of artists. I've been thinking a lot about Mahalia Jackson. She's an artist that inspires me because people don't appreciate how committed she was to civil rights, to human rights. Mm-hmm. But she came to Montgomery during the boycott to raise money for the churches. And during that time, Dr. King's home was bombed. And she stayed another day to raise more money. And I was watching a video of her at the Newport Jazz Festival in the early 1970s, and they were celebrating Louis Armstrong's birthday. And she came out on stage, and she just said some kind words about Louis Armstrong, and then she started singing Just a Closer Walk with Thee. And even in that setting, it was a mostly white jazz audience, but she just, she was out there, she had her piano player, and at some point she became so overcome with the idea that you have to keep pushing. She stepped away from the mic and she kept singing, but you couldn't really hear her, but she was still singing. And then Louis Armstrong came up on stage and he embraced her. And I think about artists like that because these are people who had to endure the humiliation of segregation. Even while they were performing for largely white audiences, they were still subjected to that second-class treatment, and they found a way to be brilliant and to perform and to have that kind of energy. I'm appreciating that now more than I ever have before because I realize the strength that that takes. But I love all the modern people as well. When we opened down here, I said this to my staff, when we were putting our concert together, we had all these great people came to come, Dave Matthews and The Roots, and all of these great folks came. But I kept saying, the person I really want is Stevie Wonder. And we couldn't reach him. It was just an impossible thing. And ultimately, we got word 3 days beforehand that he was going to come. And we stood down there at the river next to the amphitheater. And he told me about his mother, born in Eufaula, Alabama, and how she could never come back. And he had tears running down his face because he was talking about how meaningful it was to be near that river where he knew enslaved people had been trafficked, and to be in this space. And those of you who were there remember he sang a spiritual that night, something he had never done before. And I appreciate artists like that who have been unwavering in their commitment to use their talent, to use the humanities to advance justice. And there's so many that do that, but those are two that stand out.
I have one more question, which I think is a wonderful way to end. But before I ask this, because I think this is a wonderful way for you to finish our remarks here today, I am so struck by the fact that, I was very honored to be here to help open the museum when it was the little baby museum, and it was the big baby, the big brother museum, that's not a good expression at all. It's the big museum now. And what do you make of the fact that it has become such a significant tourist attraction and economic driver? The mayor of Montgomery, I spoke with him a couple of days ago, said it's one of the top 5 attractions in the state in a very short period of time, especially given everything that the whole country's gone through with travel and with the pandemic and so forth. I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, you told me earlier, just a little commercial here, we weren't able to put on a lot of our programming from Montgomery. We've been here all week. In fact, my team is here. I brought a team of folks down here. We've been here all week reporting from Montgomery, and a lot of our coverage will be on next weekend because we're sharing the space with the news from overseas. So I do hope you'll tune into that. Just a little tiny commercial for NPR, which we all hope you support.
Absolutely.
And check your local listings. And do support the pledge drives. The fact that it's become such a significant attraction, what do you make of that? What do you think that says?
I think people want the truth. I think we all want something better. I do. I really believe there is something better waiting for us in this country. There's something that feels more like equality, more like justice, more like freedom than any of us have yet experienced. But to get there, we have to do this work. And we open these sites to help people along that journey. And while it seems scary to some people and didn't seem like a thing that would draw people here, I think fundamentally, we want something better. We don't want to live lives that are just merely tolerating the narratives that we've been given. We want something that breaks down those barriers. What I love about what young people are saying to do is they want something authentic and honest and true. And I think that's what this represents. I mean, I don't know why we had to do in Montgomery what no one has done in this country. I mean, I wasn't looking to do this, but when you go to the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg and you go to the Holocaust Memorial, you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., you realize we have not created space in this country that motivate people to deal honestly with those histories. And when you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, no matter what your background is, when you come out of that museum, you are motivated to say, never again. You see a pile of shoes, the remnants of people who were killed. You're motivated to say never again. And what we're trying to do are to create sites that motivate everyone when they leave to say never again should we tolerate racism and bigotry and injustice the way we have tolerated it in our country. And I think people are yearning for something that gets us past the new purpose that we put in our new museum. What we say is, you know, the purpose of this museum is to create a space that helps us advance a society where the children of our children are no longer burdened by the legacy of slavery, no longer burdened by racism and bigotry, no longer subjected to presumptions of dangerousness and guilt and injustice. And I think people want that. And it's just work we have to do. But that's what I think has caused people to come. And I'm excited by that, because the more people who come, the more I'm affirmed and excited about what we can do to achieve that better day.
Mm. Well, thank you. I'm just going to take a moment of personal privilege just to say thank you. It's been a delight to be with you once again. I'm so glad this worked out. I want to thank my NPR team, wherever they are, for the work that, there they are, hello, that who came to Washington. We've been here all week. We had a colleague came from Birmingham to support our work. I want to thank Chuck for inviting me to be part of this once again, and I want to thank all of you who were here today to share this time with us. It's truly been a delight, especially for those of us who haven't had the opportunity to wear real clothes for 2 years and to be with people, put our sneakers and our sweats away to get ourselves polished up to be part of this really special event. And I'm going to close with a question from the audience, which really follows some of the beautiful words we heard from the Lewis family earlier. And I was so happy to hear those words, and someone wants to know, and I want to know, how you find the hopefulness and motivation to continue to do this work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly seeing things that inspire me, and I can end with this. If you go to our museum, there's a big exhibit, and it's an exhibit with jars of soil. As you know, when we opened the memorial, we started this project where we're going around the country and we're asking communities to reckon locally with their history of lynching. And so we invite people to go to lynching sites and dig the soil from the lynching site and put it in a jar with the name of the lynching victim and the date, and then bring it back to Montgomery, and we put it in our exhibit to honor that person, but to also encourage the kind of tangible activism that goes in remembrance. And we did one of these events a couple of years ago here in Alabama, and there was a middle-aged black woman who came, and she was unhappy because her sister was supposed to come with her, and her sister didn't come, and so she wasn't sure she could do it by herself. But we had the meeting, and people kind of got fired up, and afterwards she said, "Oh, Mr. Stevenson, I'm going to go do it." And we gave her a jar, and we gave her the implement, we gave her the memo, and it turns out that her location was in a pretty remote section of West Alabama. And when she got there, she was terrified because it was on a dirt road. It looked really scary, but she said, "No, I'm going to do this." And she went to the site where the lynching took place, and she got down on her knees, and she was about to start digging, and a truck drove by, a pickup truck drove by, and there was a big white guy in the truck, and he slowed down and stared at her as he drove by. And she said she started getting really nervous, and then the man stopped his truck, turned it around, and drove back by again and stared at her some more. And then to her horror, he parked his truck, got out of the truck, and started walking toward a big guy. And we tell people when they go do the soil collections that they don't have to explain what they're doing. They can just say, "You're getting dirt for your garden." And she told me that. I was just going to tell that man, "I'm getting dirt for my garden. You don't have to bother me." And the man came over, and sure enough, he said, "What are you doing?" And then she said, "Mr. Stevenson, something got a hold of me." And I told that man, "I'm digging soil because this is where a black man was lynched in 1937, and I'm going to honor his life today." And she said she started digging real fast, and the man just stood there. And then the man said, "Does that paper talk about the lynching?" And she said, "It does." And then he said, "Can I read it?" And she gave the man the paper, and he stood there reading while she started to dig. And after the man read the paper, he put it down, and he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but would it be all right if I helped you?" And she said, "Yes." And the man got down on his knees, and she offered him the implement to dig the soil. He said, "No, no, 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 I don't need that. I'll just use my hands." And he started throwing his hands into the soil and putting it in the jar, and he kept throwing his hands into the soil. And she said there was something about the conviction with which he was picking up the soil and putting it that just moved her. And the next thing she knew, she had a tear running down her face. And the man stopped. He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm upsetting you." And she said, "No, no, no, you're blessing me." And she kept digging, and he kept digging, and they got toward the top of the jar, and she noticed that the man had slowed down. And she looked over at him, and his face had turned red, and his shoulders were shaking. And she put her hand on his shoulder, and she said, "Are you all right?" And that's when the man looked at her, and he said, "No, ma'am, no, ma'am." He said, "I'm just so worried that it might have been my grandfather that participated in lynching this man." And she said they both sat there on the roadside and wept. And then he said to her, he said, "Ma'am, I want to take a picture of you holding the jar of soil." And she said, "Well, I want to take a picture of you holding the jar of soil." And they took pictures of each other, and then she said, "Well, I'm going back to Montgomery to give this to the museum people." And he said, "Would it be all right if I followed you?" And they both came to Montgomery to contribute that jar of soil to our exhibit. And I'm not naive enough to believe that beautiful things like that happen every time you tell the truth. But I am persuaded that when we don't tell the truth, we deny ourselves the beauty that is justice. And so when I see those jars and I meet people like that, I'm constantly energized and constantly affirmed to believe the things that I believe, to do the things we're trying to do. And that's the beautiful thing about justice work. And I know John Lewis understood this. You just keep your eyes on the prize and you hold on, and you'll be amazed by all the ways in which people and others will kind of carry you along the way. And I don't feel in any way overwhelmed or overburdened by this. It's overwhelming, and there are challenges, but I feel really uplifted because I'm surrounded by people who keep encouraging and keep affirming the importance of advancing justice. And so that keeps me going. I can't complain. I don't have any complaints about the kind of work I do. I feel really privileged to just contribute in a small way to this broader goal of human rights.
Bryan Stevenson, it's a delight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
If this isn't a great example of how the humanities can feed our soul, I don't know what is. So Bryan and Michelle, thank you very much. I also want to thank the Lewis family for coming here today and letting us honor your uncle. Thank you very much, and brother. Of course, to put on an event like this, it takes many, many people, and I want to thank our volunteers who came today and helped us to coordinate this big event. I also want to thank the staff of the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and I want to call them out by name. Graydon Rust, Rachel Hartzell, Laura Anderson, Philip Jordan, Alma Anthony, and of course our executive director, Chuck Holmes. It takes a lot to do this event. They did a great job. Just a reminder, as you're heading out, there's Bryan Stevenson's book, as you're walking out, Just Mercy, and make sure you pick up a copy. Also outside of the hotel by the fountains, our friends from the Freedom Rides Museum have brought over a restored 1957 Greyhound bus, just like the one that John Lewis rode with other freedom riders in 1961. I want to give a big shout out to Dorothy Walker, who is the site director of the Freedom Rides Museum, for sharing this with us today. And finally, I want to thank you all for being here. It's been a great event. It has far exceeded all expectations. And the fact that all of you are still sitting here, even though it's well past 1 o'clock, says a lot. I'm a Rotarian. I know, 1 o'clock. Done. So, what a great event, and thank you so much for coming. Make sure you get involved with us. We are an organization that is out there on the front lines promoting the humanities, promoting history, promoting justice, promoting the things that are important for us as we move forward in our daily lives. And so I encourage you to keep contact with the Alabama Humanities Alliance and support our programs, to apply for grants, to do those things that really help us promote the humanities in Alabama, because I know that we can make this a better place. And thank you so much. Have a safe trip home, and may God bless you.